What's up, YouTube? Here are 10 myths about prison. I'm going to tell you the truth about what it's like in Arizona prisons and whether or not these are true. Number 1, you have to join a gang. This is completely untrue. You do not have to join a gang. If you get sent to prison, you could be a lawyer who went out, had a couple drinks, got into a car accident, hit somebody, and you get sentenced to 5 years in prison. In fact, I think that's the premise for a movie, if I'm not mistaken. But if you get to prison and you decide that you want to mind your own business and read books all day, you can get to prison and read books all day long, and nobody is going to try to get you to join a gang. However, if you do join a gang, you are in that gang, and it's not like you can come and go as you please. Once you're in the gang, you're in the gang. But as far as having to join a gang, regardless of what race you are in, you do not have to join a gang when you get to prison. Myth number 2, prisons do not do enough to rehabilitate inmates. This is completely false. I do not care what prison you are in. If a person wants to get out of prison and be successful, at the end of the day, it does not matter what classes they took in prison. It does not matter what programs the prison offered. It is 100% dependent on them. There are tons of programs in all of the state prisons, and the federal prisons offer even more programs. This is something that I've heard for years and years and years from inmates. I've heard it from prison advocates. It is completely false. If I wanted to get out of prison and go back to robbing people, then I would have gotten out of prison and went back to robbing people. It had nothing to do with the classes I took when I was in prison. If I wanted to get out of prison, though, and start a business like I did, then I could get out of prison and start a business like I did. Myth number 3, prison is full of innocent people. This is completely false. 99% of people in prison will tell you what they are there for. It is so misconstrued in movies when you have that guy who's like, I'm innocent, I'm 100% innocent, I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. That is not how it works. Everybody in prison got caught for a crime, they signed a plea agreement. Don't get me wrong, is there innocent people in prison? Yes, but it's probably less than 1% of 10% of the entire inmate population. This myth is completely false. Myth number 4, smaller and weaker inmates get in prison. This is false as well. Does happen in prison, but it is very rare. And there are a few reasons why it is very rare. 1, there's a lot of homosexuals in prison. There's no reason for bigger, stronger inmates to be smaller, weaker inmates when there is a lot of gay guys in prison. There's 2 sets of rules in prison. You have the guards rules and you have the inmates rules. In Arizona prisons, 2 men are not allowed to have any type of relationship that's physical. And that is against the guards' rules, but more importantly, it's against the inmates' rules as well. If 2 white boys get caught doing some gay bathroom, you know what's gonna happen to them? The other white boys are gonna beat the shit out of them. It's just not allowed in prison. It doesn't matter what race, it doesn't matter, who they are, it is not allowed in prison. It does not happen. If one inmate were to another inmate, if a black guy were to another black guy, the person who committed the would probably get killed by his own race in prison. That stuff is not allowed. Back in the 80s, back in the 90s, it was a lot different back then, so it's possible. I've heard stories. In the 7 years I did in prison, I've never seen it happen, but I heard stories that back in the day, back in the 90s, it was, probably a little bit more common. Number 5, you're not allowed to ask people how long they're doing or what their crime is. This myth is another myth that is completely false. When you meet people in prison, let's say you're, playing poker and you meet somebody at the poker table, or you're working out and you're doing pull-ups next to somebody else and you start chopping it up. Usually within the first 10 minutes, the 2 people are talking about how long each of them has. I got 6 years, oh, what'd you do? I got my 3rd DUI, I got 9 years, armed robbery, 12 years, manslaughter. It is very, very, very common for inmates to know exactly what everybody else is in there for and exactly how long everybody else has. Myth number 6, gangs run the prison. This is completely false, at least here in Arizona. I can't speak on other states like California, but in Arizona, it is completely run by races. We have 5 races in Arizona. You've got the whites, You've got the Chicanos, which are Mexicans from the United States. You've got Paisas, which are Mexicans from Mexico. You've got Native Americans, or the chiefs as we call them, and you've got the blacks, or kinfolks. Those are the 5 races, and that is how prisons are run. If you get into prison and you're a Crip and you're trying to get into beef with people who are Bloods, that's not how it works. Immediately the races will put an end to that shit. That shit does not fly in prisons. It's all about the race. So if you're black and you're a Crip and there's another black dude that's a Blood in prison, you guys are the same. Like there ain't no beef, and there ain't no Crips and Bloods in Arizona prisons. It does not work that way. Myth number 7, the food is terrible. This myth is true. Prison food is bad. It's not as bad as county jail food, but it's still very bad. Prison food sucks. It is just not good food. It's very low quality. And for the most part, if you have a lot of money in prison, you probably don't even go to the chow hall and eat. You just cook, you make spreads, because the food really is terrible. So there's not a lot more I can add to that myth, as that is true. Myth number 8, child molesters and get killed when they get to the yard. Now, this myth, unfortunately, is not true. I know people see, these posts on Facebook, and some guy gets caught, a child, and he's going to prison for 10 years, and everybody in the comment section is like, oh, he's going to get what he has coming to him when he gets to prison. That's not the way it works. They do not go to GP, as we call it, which is general population. They go to SO yards, which are sex offender yards. They're very special yards where they are completely isolated from GP. There's no chance for them to really run into us. Now, in some crazy instance that it did happen, and some administrative accident happened, and a did get put onto a GP yard, I imagine the child would probably immediately run to the police and go into protective custody, because he knows that he wouldn't make it very long. But if the inmates did get to that person, usually it would be very quick, it would be very fast, and on a 3-yard or a 4-yard, yeah, they would probably kill that person. So that myth is, it's true and false. The inmates would if they could. Unfortunately, they can't. Myth number 9, you have to put in work when you get to prison. First of all, a lot of people might not understand what it means to put in work. If you just got to prison, you're 21 years old, and you're Mexican, and let's say the Mexicans come up to you and say, hey, you need to do this for us. Go stab this guy. Go beat this guy up. That's what put in work means. It means you have to put in work for your race or for your gang. You have to put in work to, rise up through the ranks of whatever affiliation you are associated with. Now, you do not have to put in work. This is another myth that is just not true. If you get to prison and decide you want to mind your own business, you can absolutely 100% mind your own business. If you get to prison and decide you want to go to school and read books, you can go to school and read books. If you want to go to church and be a Christian, you can go to church and be a Christian. You do not have to put in work. This relates back to the first rule, where if you were to join a gang, in that case, then you have to put in work. If you decided you wanted to go the gang route because you felt like you needed protection, which is complete nonsense, then in that case you would have to put in work. But as far as just getting to prison, you have no affiliations, you do not have to put in work. Business, you don't need to go put in work to be tough. That's not what prison's it's not going to help you get out any faster. At the end of the day, the goal is to get out, get home to your family as fast as possible. Finally, myth number 10, if you punch the biggest guy in the face on your first day in prison, nobody will mess with you. This is another one of those myths you see in the movies a lot. And it's completely false. If you randomly get to prison in your first day, you just walk up to the biggest guy and you punch him in the face, your own race is probably gonna beat you up. You're probably gonna get disciplined for nobody's gonna give you a pat on the back, nobody's gonna give you kudos. That's not the way prison works. You can't just randomly walk up to people and punch them in the face. That's just not the way it works. Especially on higher yards, right? On a 4-yard, that's really just not gonna fly. There are rules, and you just fit in. You follow the flow. You follow the rules. Prison's a very easy place to navigate. You don't need to get in there and pretend to be a tough guy. But if somebody ever calls you a bitch or somebody ever calls you a punk, in that case, it's time to fight immediately. No questions asked. You just get off on that person immediately. If you don't, your own race is probably going to whoop your ass later on in the day. But getting to prison, punching the biggest guy in the face, Not a good idea. 100% do not recommend. So those are 10 myths about prison. The majority of them are false. It's not really like you guys see in the movies. It's not like a lot of the other YouTubers, I think, who try to pump it up, make it seem. For the most part, it's a lot of downtime. It's a lot of idle time, sitting around, twiddling your thumbs, doing absolutely nothing, waiting to get out of prison 99% of the time. 1% of the time when it pops off, then it pops off, and then it goes back to being, you know, 99% downtime. So I hope you guys like this video. Give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.